Hello, Iterative Marketers! Welcome to the Iterative Marketing Podcast, where each week we give marketers and entrepreneurs actionable ideas, techniques, and examples to improve your marketing results. If you want notes and links to the resources discussed on the show, sign up to get them emailed to you each week at iterativemarketing.net. There you'll also find the Iterative Marketing blog and our community LinkedIn group where you can share ideas and ask questions of your fellow iterative marketers. Now let's dive into the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iterative Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Robinson, and with me, as always, is the exuberant and somewhat gregarious Elizabeth Aaron.
Hi, Steve. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. A little bit of a head cold, so apologize to our listeners if you hear me sniffle.
Yeah, it is that time of year. I know in our family we've got the viruses swooping through as the kids go back to school. So
summer is over. How did that happen so fast?
I don't know. It seems like a switch just flipped and the weather is definitely in fall mode. And I don't know. I'm mourning the loss of summer and also trying to avoid thinking about all of the summer projects that didn't actually get done this summer.
That's a little frustrating. I love fall, so I'm excited for, the yellow and orange leaves that are everywhere, and everyone has pumpkins right now. And I'm not a fan of the pumpkin spice latte. I know that's like a big fall thing. That's not one of my favorites, but actual pumpkins, I'm excited to see them in the stores. So
yeah, it'll be nice to, starting the family gatherings with Thanksgiving and everything coming up. So it's good.
Definitely.
So what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about due state. We've gone through the different journey states. We did a great high-level overview, and then we've sort of been doing these deep dives into them. And so today we're going a deep dive into due state.
And so as we've done in the past episodes, we'll go through a quick overview of the journey states. That said, if you haven't listened to episode 7, I think, where we go through see, think, and do, it was a while back. We'll link to it in the show notes. But if you haven't gone through the episode where we went through see, think, and do, definitely take a moment to rewind and go and take a look at that. And then it wouldn't hurt if you had listened to the other two deep dives, the one on see and the one on think. But if you haven't, I think you'll stay afloat just fine as we work through this episode.
So once we go through sort of that higher level, we'll take a look at what our specific goals are for our due audience, the content that we use to target the due audience, and then how we actually target the due audience. And then we'll wrap it up with one of our favorite topics, and that's measurement.
So let's start with that high level overview. When we talk about see, think, do, we're talking about a framework that we use to map the customer's journey. And we took that framework from a really, really smart guy, Avinash Kaushik, who's at Google, and we've adapted it slightly and tweaked just the tail end of that journey. So I'm going to go through each of the states, and I think it's important to note that people bounce from state to state. This isn't necessarily like a linear progression, although in a perfect world, we'd love it to be. The reality is that our customers actually bounce from state to state. So we start with the C state. At the C state, this is a qualified prospect, somebody who could buy your product. They have the means, they have the need, but they're not looking at your product at this particular moment. So they're perfectly satisfied with the one they've got, or they just haven't run across an actual need to purchase your product just yet. We go into a deep dive into the C state in episode 23 if you want to take a moment to go and listen to that. Think state is where the prospect now, not only are they qualified to purchase your product, but something has put your product or service on their radar. So now they're considering, they're thinking about it, but they have no commitment to themselves or to anybody else to actually follow through with a purchase on this product. They're just kind of thinking about it. There's an inkling there that they might need one in the future. Due state is where we flipped and we're actually committed to buy. Now that doesn't mean that we have some pending consequence if we don't buy. It just means that we have made a commitment to ourselves or to somebody else that we're going to follow through with a purchase. It also doesn't mean that prospect is going to buy from you. There's still an opportunity for them to buy from someone else. So for example, I could be in a position where I'm in due state about buying a new car if my lease is up on my current car. There's an impending date, time frame that I'm going to have to make a purchase. Otherwise, I'm not going to have something to drive. this comes up in a variety of different ways. Usually it's an emotional commitment we've made, that switch is flipped inside of us, that we've decided that we're going to follow through on a purchase of a given product or service. We just aren't sure exactly where we're going to buy it or which product it might be. We have 2 more states that we'll talk about in deep dives in the future, and that is grow and give. And this is after that prospect becomes a customer. At this point, we flip over into grow, where they have bought from you, they're loyal to you, but they're not singing your praises to others necessarily. So at this point, you're trying to really nurture and grow that relationship, and they're growing into you likewise, hence the term grow. And then give is where not only has that prospect become a customer of yours and a loyal customer of yours, but now they're singing your praises. They're out evangelizing your brand to others, and they're writing reviews, and they're sharing the word of the great work or product that you have.
So this was the sort of high level overview. If you'd like a little bit of a deeper dive into each of these, Steve wrote a fantastic blog called See, Think, Do, a framework for understanding your prospect state of being. We'll link to that in the show notes. And if you'd like to, even pause the podcast for a minute. If you're watching on video, go and read the blog. It's going to give you a little bit of a tighter overview of that. Otherwise, we do have another previous episode that we covered it. And then we also have the deep dives for See and Think, and we'll link to all of those in our show notes. But for today, we are really focusing on do.
And so again, your do state, this is somebody who's made somewhat of a commitment either to themselves, and that's usually in a B2C type scenario, or possibly to somebody else, which usually comes up in a B2B scenario where they've said, part of my plan for the year is to purchase X, or identify a vendor for Y, right? They've made that commitment to purchase. That doesn't mean they're ready to purchase from you. It just means that they've made a commitment to purchase. And so we have a number of goals as marketers try to influence that person's purchase.
So the first thing that we want to do is we want to elicit an action or a commitment to purchase from them. We want to know that they are ready to make that purchase. Again, it may not be with us, but they are at that state where they have decided that they're going to buy. And we want to know that they are ready to buy.
We also want to make sure that we're a resource for them as they move through the buyer's journey. So really at this point, it's the end state of that buyer's journey. So we want to help them understand the why they need to buy our product, or help them with any last minute comparisons between us and another vendor or another product. It's really helping tie up that purchase decision in a nice little bow.
And we want to do all of this while being a resource, but not getting in the way of a salesperson if a salesperson's involved. And this is very important here, because this is really where we see a lot of, sort of the marketing and the sales process coming together. If a salesperson is involved in the process, we want to support them without actually getting in their way.
And then finally, while somebody's in this do state, if we can, we want to take an opportunity to support the brand and its key messages. I'll talk about this later, but we all buy from those people that we know, like, and trust. And so anything we can do to reinforce the brand, to make the prospect feel like they know us, feel like they like us, and feel like they trust us as they're wrapping up that sale, we want to continue that presence from a brand standpoint.
So why is all of this important?
Well, it's important for a couple of different reasons, and it depends a little bit on whether you're B2B or B2C, or more importantly, whether you have a salesperson involved or not. If you don't have a salesperson involved, then part of the function of marketing at due state is to get that customer to act, because even though they've made a commitment to themselves or to somebody else to purchase, sometimes there's no immediacy to that time frame. Sometimes there is no path for them to follow to complete that purchase. You want to lay that path out in front of them and make it as easy as possible for them to go down.
Another reason this is important is a due state prospect is ready to make a final selection. They're ready to make a purchase. And we want to make sure that that experience, as they're moving into those final steps of that purchasing path, aligns with the experience that they've had throughout the rest of their journey state. It needs to feel the same to them. If it doesn't, if it feels off in any way, shape, or form, they're going to step back and they're going to think twice about making that purchasing decision. So we really want to make sure that we have a consistent experience for them.
This is especially true in B2B or in instances when you have a salesperson, because oftentimes marketing will just stop as soon as that deal is handed off to the salesperson, and anything you've got going in your marketing automation system hits a dead stop because we don't want to interfere with the salesperson. The reality is that that can create an incongruence in that person's and that prospect's experience with the brand. And if you can naturally continue the relationship from a brand level while you have a salesperson involved, it can create a much more congruent experience.
It's funny, actually. I was just talking to one of our clients about this morning, and they said, well, sales is handling it, so we don't have to do anything. And I'm like, no. It's very important that you're still involved because you've been talking to them for the past 9 months. And if you suddenly drop off, that's not a good experience for them. And so this is just another reason why it's very important to make sure that marketing and sales both have a seat at the table when you're talking about the journey states and the different collateral and messages that you're using to put out to your prospects.
And it comes back to a concept that I've talked about a lot in the past, and that is that as human beings, we make decisions with our emotions. And I know that that's somewhat hard to stomach because we all think of ourselves as very rational human beings, and we're not entirely off on some emotional tangent all the time. But the reality is that the decision-making engine inside of us, while it can be informed by logic, ultimately is an emotional engine. And so as a marketer, it's very important to continue that brand messaging, that brand alignment that helps that person feel like they know, like, and trust that brand as they complete that purchase. And so tying back to the brand values and continuing that messaging through the do state is really an important move.
So let me ask you this, Steve. We get asked this question a lot as we're working with new clients who aren't necessarily familiar with the journey states. They love do state. They love do state because this is where we see the conversions. And a lot of them want to focus or put a big bulk of their efforts in the do state and maybe not as much effort or even ignore see and think. Why do we not want to do that?
Oh, this is you hit on a hot button here, Elizabeth. This is like you put a quarter in the machine now. So no, this is not good. But yeah, this is really a common message that we hear from our clients and prospects. This is something that we hear every day. It's also something that I'm reading a lot more of online, and it really has me a bit disturbed. This comes back to that idea of, again, doing business with those that we know, like, and trust. And so I like to tell a little story here. So imagine that you're selling your house, right? Or you're thinking of selling your house. You haven't really actually decided to sell your house, but you're thinking of selling your house. And so there's this realtor, a friend of a friend that you know that you hit up for some advice. Hey, do I upgrade my kitchen before I sell? What's the best time of year to sell? And so you're pinging him with these questions here and there. He's giving you some great advice along the way. And then let's just say there's a magic algorithm out there that's able to predict when somebody is in market for a realtor and ready to list their house. And that magic algorithm suddenly figures out that you're ready to list at the same time as you are actually ready to list your house, and you've made all these preparations. The floodgates open, you start getting offer after offer from realtor after realtor to list your house. Who are you going to pick up the phone and call? It's not going to be all these people that swooped in at the last minute ready to help you as you go to list your house. It's going to be the person that you've been relying on for that advice all along the way, the person that's been with you on that entire customer journey. And the same thing is true when it comes to marketing. And so you'll read out there all of these folks focused on things like performance marketing as kind of the buzzword right now, where everybody should have all of their eggs in this do basket. And it's driven by this glut of data that's now available that allows you to swoop in at the last minute and detect when somebody is in market for a given product or service. The reality is you'll lose every single time to a competitor that's been there along the way for every step of the journey because your prospect has had an opportunity to develop an affinity for that competitor's brand. They know that brand. They like that brand and they trust that brand, and they're going to do business with that brand unless there's a darn good reason not to, right up until the end.
Well, and it also makes the assumption that you're in the right place at the right time. And while that may happen on occasion, to build an entire business model off of being in the right place at the right time isn't something that is actually going to probably come to light and be able to support you. So a combination of right place, right time, and helping to make that more likely by being there in see state and think state as they're moving through the customer journey, is the way that we make sure that we can get those sales.
And we see this a lot with clients and prospects that are very dependent on AdWords, because AdWords is a great example of swooping in at the right place at the right time. If you're bidding on high intent keywords where you're counting on catching those people that are ready to buy and are just trying to figure out where to buy from, that model works until it doesn't. And all you need is some brand to really establish that awareness and trust and be the place that people go. Think Amazon, for example. How many times do you start shopping on Google now compared to before you knew about Amazon, right? It can really disrupt that model because you're counting on swooping in at the last minute when the person's ready to buy and not following them along for the journey. I think this is a great opportunity for us to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the actual mechanics of the due state. We'll talk about what you need for due state content and how to target it, and then finally how to measure it. So let's take a moment and go help some people.
Before we continue, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask you iterative marketers a small but meaningful favor and ask that you give a few dollars to a charity that's important to one of our own. This week's charitable cause was sent in by Damon Chopin of Portlight Technology. Damon asks that you make a contribution to the Randy Chopin Give Someone a Chance Foundation, which is dedicated to supporting charities, groups, and organizations in Jefferson, Wisconsin and its surrounding communities. Learn more at randychopinfoundation.org or visit the link in the show notes. If you would like to submit your cause for consideration for our next podcast, please visit iterative-marketing.net/podcast and click the Share a Cause button. We love sharing causes that are important to you.
And we're back. So before the break, we talked about what due state was, why it's so important for marketing to have a presence in due state, even in organizations where that's kind of a sales-driven focus. And we went off on a little rant about marketers that seem to think that due is the only important place to be. Let's refocus the conversation now and jump into what we need for good content to support the due state.
Oftentimes, a due state prospect has already made the emotional decision that they're ready to buy. And so this is the right time to introduce features and benefits that will help them to rationalize this emotional decision that they've made.
So for example, say you're out shopping for a new pair of designer jeans, or a prospect is out shopping for a new pair of designer jeans, and they've put these jeans in their shopping cart, and then they go away. They've obviously sent some signals that they're likely in a due state. They're ready. They've picked out the actual exact product that they want to buy. They just haven't pulled the trigger and made the purchase. And so now, if you as the marketer take the opportunity to retarget them, you can give them the messages that help them rationalize that decision if they're on the fence. So things like, these could be your forever jeans, or everyone needs at least one pair of phenomenal jeans, can help that person rationalize that decision and then come back and complete the purchase.
I am notorious for doing this. We've talked about this before. And sometimes this due state prospect needs a push or an incentive to move forward to make that final purchasing decision. And so it's at this point in the journey that you want to use different tactics that will help create a sense of urgency or a need to act now. And, coming back to the jeans example that you gave, maybe it's an email that shows up a week later that is either advertising a temporary price discount, or it's a special offer or coupon if you act within a certain time frame.
Yeah, the key is creating that sense of urgency, because just because I've made a commitment to purchase something doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to buy it this week, this month, or this year, or that I might not forget that I'm in due state on that particular product or service. So putting an end date or a sense of urgency or an incentive to act now instead of later is really key. As long as you do it naturally and not in a really sort of manipulative way, because I think consumers have gotten smarter about that.
Our jean example is a great example for a B2C, but when we're talking B2B, it's a little bit of a different type of market. It's a different sort of purchasing, the decisions that you're making are a little bit different. So in terms of a B2B, this is a great time to introduce a one sheet that can help the prospect share the benefits, features and benefits with other people within their organization that may be involved in that purchasing decision and may need that extra little boost to get past that next hurdle.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples of this is actually from Content Marketing Institute. So if you've ever taken a look at their phenomenal event, Content Marketing World, you'll notice that if you go to the site for Content Marketing World, under the FAQ, there is an item there that says justify your trip. And it is exactly for this purpose. And it's blatant. I mean, it's right in your face saying, hey, you need to convince others within your organization to pay for this. So here's what you need to tell them. And it really helps those that have made that decision to purchase, again, which is a largely emotional decision. But you can't rationalize an emotional decision to your boss or to other colleagues within the organization as to why you need to buy a particular product or service from a given vendor. So you've got a commitment to purchase. Now you need to explain why we're going to buy from so-and-so. Having that the features and benefits laid out at this point is the right time, not earlier in the journey.
Due state content gives us a unique opportunity that we don't have in the other journey states, and that's the opportunity to upsell or cross-sell. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so sometimes you have somebody who's made that commitment to buy. They're probably going to buy from you. Now you can take this opportunity to actually increase the size of that sale, because anything you add on the top of that sale usually is some of the most profitable stuff you can put on there. So for example, we have a client in the software space who part of their marketing in the due state is to promote additional modules of their software that can be bolted onto the base purchase, thereby driving up the individual order size or initial sale size of that sale. You can't really do that any earlier in the sales process because they don't have that commitment to buy until they hit due state.
So what do we need to have to make sure that we are creating effective due state content?
I would think if you were to create a checklist or a punch list for due state content, it really needs to accomplish three things. First, it needs to really lay a finely polished and clear path to purchase, right? No encumbrances at all. We want to make sure that there's no friction in getting that person from wherever they're at down to making a commitment to purchase if it's not an immediate sale, or if it's e-commerce or an immediate sale, getting them to actually buy, right?
And I think it's important to note that we can't force them down this, but all we can do is make this as streamlined of a process, as easy of a process for them so that they don't have any roadblocks or hurdles that they now have to get over. Again, we can't force them, but we can make this as easy as possible on them to finish that purchase.
And while features and benefits are exactly the wrong thing to lead with during see and think, now is the time to pull those out, because now if you've done your job right in see and think, your prospect, it already knows, likes, and trusts your brand. They're ready to buy. They've made an emotional decision to buy, but now they need to back that up with some logic, right? They need to feed that emotional decision-making machine with some logic, and then they might need to justify their action to others. And so now's the time to pull out the stops on the features and benefits and really explain to them why they need to be buying your product or your service. And then finally, you want to create a sense of urgency. So just because they have a commitment to buy doesn't mean they're going to buy now. And if you can, in a non-sleazy, manipulative way, pull out that sense of urgency and get them to commit today versus next week or next month. Not only does it accelerate your revenue, but it also makes sure that they don't have time to be persuaded by another competitor to buy from them. And so if you can, lock them in and convince them that now is the time.
So that's sort of the three keys to creating effective due state content. Once we have that content, how do we target them?
Here's where your first-party data is key. And I know we talked about first-party data a fair amount in our deep dive into Think, but if you don't have those signals that say that this person is ready to buy, it's very hard to approach them at the right time with this due state content, because if you introduce too much of it too early in the process, or while people are in other states, it's going to turn them off. And so you need that first party data. You need data from your website that says what content they're engaging in, making sure that you have content that is very commercial in nature, that clearly indicates that, hey, I'm ready to buy. I'm looking at prices. I'm looking at the features and benefits. I'm digging in at competitive comparisons to understand if I need to buy this now from you. Right. And so it's that first party data that'll really help you detect those signals of who's in market and if they're ready to buy.
And we detect those signals by their response to offers that we've shown them in Think State, correct?
Right. Just like we talked about dangling some Think State stuff inside of your C audience, you're going to want to dangle some Do State stuff in front of your Think State audience, because otherwise you have no way of knowing when they've jumped into Do. Sometimes it might even make sense to dangle a little bit of Do State in front of your C State audience, keeping the bulk of your messaging appropriate for that journey state. But if your buyer's journey often has people jumping right from C to Do, you can't wait for them to go through Think. So it might make sense to dangle it there. But if they're acting on an offer to purchase, that's a clear indication that they are likely in Do State. And that's when you want to, again, pull out the stops on your Do State content and really drive that urgency and give them those features and benefits.
I think this is a great place to add in that the sales team is another great resource here. And it's so important that your sales team is maintaining the journey state inside of your CRM and that the audiences are properly synced. The sales team is talking directly to these people. They are picking up the phone. They are, interacting with them through email, in some cases social media as well, and they know where they are within that buying journey. So that their ability to update that information in CRM is invaluable and can help to correctly identify when someone is in Do State.
And this will play itself out in a variety of different ways. If you're pulling lists for direct mail, you're going to want to make sure that you're excluding those people that are in Do from your particularly C or Think State content, because it'll be incongruent with where they are in the journey state. Same thing's true of marketing automation. You're going to want to make sure that any segmentation things are updated in CRM as well as their journey state, so that you can actually send some content to them while they're in Do State and have it align with their segment, their persona, and as well as where they are in the journey. And then we've been doing some great work with on the paid media side in using CRM targeting and IP-based targeting to get the right message in front of the audience who's in Do State, so that we can now get some of that features and benefits messaging out when it's appropriate to where their journey is, as indicated by the sales team.
Now, getting back to the right place, right time sort of idea that we talked about earlier, pay-per-click like Google AdWords and Bing is a channel, or are channels that are suited for identifying those people who are ready to buy now. The key is that you want to make sure that you target high intent keywords along with your product or service. Do you want to talk a little bit about those high intent keywords?
Yeah. So if we come back to our designer jeans example, if you were an e-commerce site selling designer jeans, you would want to target keywords like buy True Religion jeans online, right? Because now that keyword of buy and online clearly indicates that there's an intent to actually make a purchase right now. They've already decided what they want to buy. Now they're trying to figure out where. The trap you don't want to fall into is that if this is your only marketing, then you're entirely competing on price, right? Because I'm simply going to buy it from the place I can get the best deal on it, not the place that I trust to deliver it on time, or whatever other values might influence my decision to make me feel like I know, like, and trust a brand and would rather spend my money there, even if I could buy it slightly cheaper somewhere else.
And then you touched on this a little bit, that we want to make sure we're dangling some Do State content in front of our Think audience. But just to reiterate that if we don't give them a path to buy, then they're not going to take it. So we want to, again, make sure that is a very clear and easy to move through, easy to navigate path. We can't force them down it, but we can make it easy for them to make that purchase.
I think that kind of rounds out how to target this content. How do we measure it?
Measurement. This is such an important topic. And again, getting a little nerdy here, I love due state because we actually get to measure the conversions, the actual sales that are happening. And that's ultimately what our goal is with due state, is that we want to close sales. And so when we're looking at the different journey states, see and think and do, this is really the easiest of the states to measure because we are able to measure those key performance indicators, things like close rate, average sales size, time to close, and then of course the one that, every C-suite loves to see, attributable revenue.
I think it's important to mention that it's not just that attributable revenue metric, though, that you want to be looking at, because if you're doing your job as a marketer during due state, you're going to be impacting other things. You're going to be impacting the deal size or the order size. You're going to be impacting the close rate or the time it takes to close, because those are other key metrics that'll help round out where you're having an impact in addition to just that revenue metric. So I know we've run very long with this particular episode, but let's sum things up here.
So your due state is your audience who has made a commitment to themselves or someone else that they're ready to buy. But keep in mind, it may not necessarily be from you.
And the content that we create for our due state really needs to do three things. One, they need to make that path to purchase as clean, clear, and obvious as possible. No friction. And make sure that you're giving them that path at as many opportunities as possible. You want to justify your purchase rationally because the decision they made was emotional. Now we need to back it up with some logic. And then we also want to create a sense of urgency so that we can accelerate revenue, make sure they don't have time to buy from someone else.
Once we have that targeted content, there are a number of ways that we can target our due state audience. We can use first-party data, who's interacting with our ready-to-buy content on our website. We can also target due state using our CRM data, especially helpful if the sales team is diligent in getting that updated. Very, very important. And then also pay-per-click is a great way to reach due state people who may not already be in your pipeline, but are ready to buy.
When it comes to measurement, due state is the easiest to quantify. It's the easiest to measure because it's coming down to the sale. It's coming down to revenue.
And keep in mind that due is not the end all. It requires support from the see and think state to truly be effective. As Steve has mentioned before, we do business with brands we know, like, and trust. And see state content and think state content and supporting our customers as they move through those states are how we help to build that relationship and become someone that they do know, like, and trust.
Excellent. Well, let's put a bow on this very long episode as we did a very deep dive into due. I want to thank everyone for making a little bit of time, for maybe a lot of time as it pertains to this episode for us this week. If you haven't already, please pop out to iTunes and give us a review, good, bad, or ugly. Helps other people discover our podcast, and you want to share things that help you, right? So please pop out there and give us a review if you haven't already. If you do, we'll be sure to give you a shout out on a future podcast, by the way. Until next week, onward and upward.
If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast directory. If you want notes and links to resources discussed on the show, sign up to get them emailed to you each week at iterativemarketing.net. There, you'll also find the Iterative Marketing blog and our community LinkedIn group where you can share ideas and ask questions of your fellow iterative marketers. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our username is @ITER8IVE, or email us at podcast@iterativemarketing.net. The Iterative Marketing Podcast is a production of Brilliant Metrics, a consultancy helping brands and agencies rid the world of marketing waste. Our producer is Heather Ullman with transcription assistance from Emily Bechtel. Our music is by C-Stock Audio Music Production and Sound Design. You can check them out at seastockaudio.com. We'll see you next week. Until then, onward and upward.